Welcome to the webinar on the Performance Measures Collection for 2019. I'm Carmen Sanchez, head lead for the parent program, and with me are Elaine Carlson, Terry Willis, and Marielle McKinnon, our contractors for the Performance Measure Collection this year. Next slide. The purpose of the webinar is to demystify the process of collecting the program measures and clarify what's expected in the 2019 data collection. While most of the webinar is intended for an audience of the projects chosen for the performance measure work this year, all parent program projects can benefit from listening to the webinar. We also want to stress that it's okay if not everything is clear to you. If you're one of the projects chosen, Elaine, Carrie, and Marielle are available to answer your questions. Your Regional Parent Technical Assistance Center can also provide you with information and resources. Parent program projects have done a fabulous job with the data collection in years past, and will also do a fabulous job with the 2019 collection. Next slide. Federal performance measurement. Let me step back and answer the unspoken question, why performance measurement? Well, because it's required by the federal government under the Government Performance and Results Act, otherwise known as GPRA. The purpose of GPRA is to make sure that the programs funded by the federal government actually work. You can see from this slide the criteria that the Office of Management and Budget used to rate the programs. So the categories you see on your screen are effective, moderately effective, adequate, inadequate, or results not demonstrated. However, each agency in the federal government determines how they will rate their programs. And even within each agency, such as Department of Education, individual offices have determined their own measures. The Office of Special Education Programs has used essentially the same measures for determining program effectiveness for many years. Next slide. OSEP performance measurement. The process for the OSEP uses involves having what they call short and long-term measures of performance. Short-term measures are more output and process-oriented. That is, that they focus on qualities of the services that our programs provide, including the cost of services. Long-term measures are more outcome-oriented. That is, that they focus on how the recipients of the services view the services or respond to those services. But most importantly, short-term measures are collected and reported every year, while the long-term measures are collected and reported only every 2 years. Please keep this in mind while we discuss the short and long-term measures for the parent program. Next slide. You also know 3 of the 4 short-term measures because we ask that you provide information that aligns with the program performance measures in your annual report. Specifically, you provide information about project measures that align with the 3 short-term program measures of quality, relevance, and usefulness. We sometimes refer to these as QRU measures. You will continue to report on the project measures that align to the program measures, but what we are discussing today is the program measure collection carried out by the STIP with your support. Notice in the wording here on the screen that for the first 2 measures, quality and relevance, it's an independent review panel that determines the program measure ratings in the program measure collection. STIP is responsible for assembling the independent review panel and providing them with the instructions for rating the quality, relevance, and usefulness of the services. As we will discuss, the review panel will base their ratings on information provided by the chosen centers. Notice, too, in the screen references to materials and products. This is wording that goes back over a decade, and we recognize that over time, the only way we can really get to these judgments is by reviewing the services provided by the centers. Note, too, that by only reviewing services, we acknowledge that many of the products parent centers use are developed by others. For example, a parent center may provide a training on developing the IEP. The training is a service. The parent center may use the building legacy materials developed by NICHE, a product, to carry out that service. So let me read the actual wording of the first 2 measures. Measure 1.1 of 4, the percentage of materials used by parent training and information centers, information projects deemed to be of high quality by an independent review panel of experts qualified to review the substantive content of the products or services. Measure 1.2 of 4, the percentage of parent training information center products and services deemed to be of high relevance to educational and early intervention policy or practice by an independent review panel of experts qualified to review the substantive content of the products or services. Next slide. Here is the wording of the third and the fourth short-term program measures. Measure 1.3 of 4, the percentage of parent training information center program products and services deemed by an independent review panel of qualified experts to be useful to improve educational early intervention policy or practice. And then the last short-term measure, an index of the federal cost per unit of output provided by the Parent Training Information Center program. For the fourth measure, the wording refers to an index. The use of the word index emphasizes that the number isn't really a dollar amount per se, since it's almost impossible to determine the actual cost of the services provided. Rather, it's an index or a way of seeing the number of services relative to the program funding and how that changes over time. We'll talk a little bit more about this in a bit. Next slide. Long-term performance measures. There are two long-term performance measures that are collected every 2 years. Both of them are about how families respond to the services provided. The first measure is about what families learn about their idea rights and responsibilities, and the second is about their ability to work with others in order to help their children. The second measure was changed in 2017. In addition, in 2017 was the first year for the new program measures survey methodology, which asked the new survey questions to a random selection of families. Although both measures were informally collected last year, the results will not be reported as part of the GEPRA reporting. Remember, these are long-term measures which are reported only every 2 years. However, the 2019 results of the measure, based on the survey reporting you all just finished, will be reported this year. Since the second measure was changed and the methods for collecting both have changed, the collection and reporting for 2019 year will be used to provide a baseline in order to set targets for subsequent years. Here's the actual wording of both measures. The percentage of parents receiving special education parent information center services who report enhanced knowledge of IDEA rights and responsibilities. And then the second, the percentage of parents receiving special education parent information center services who report having enhanced capacity to work with schools and service providers effectively in meeting the needs of their children. Next slide. So what does it mean that something is high quality? How are the measures judged? OSEP has determined that there are two dimensions for quality: substance and communication. The substance dimension is, does this content delivered to the service reflect evidence of conceptual soundness and quality grounded in legislation or policy? The communication dimension is the content delivered to the service presented in such a way so as to be clearly understood, as evidenced by being well organized, free of editorial errors, and appropriately formatted? The independent panel reviewers judges the quality of a service by scoring each dimension on a 4-point scale, ranging from 0, which would be very low, to 1, moderately low, to 2, moderately high, to 3, very high. In addition, the score for the substance dimension is double-weighted, which means that the services can receive either 0, 2, 4, or 6 points for substance. Together, the two dimensions can add up to as many as 9 points, and all scores of 6 and higher are considered high quality. Next slide. What does it mean to have a highly relevant service? OSEP has determined that there are 3 dimensions for relevance: need, pertinence, and reach. The need dimension is, does the content delivered through the service attempt to solve an important problem or deal with a critical issue? The pertinence dimension is, does the content delivered through the service address a problem or issue recognized as important by the target audiences? And the reach dimension is, to what extent is the content delivered through the service applicable to diverse segments of the target audiences? The independent panel reviewers judges the relevance of the service, scoring each dimension on a 4-point scale, again ranging from 0 for very low, to 1 moderately low, to 2 moderately high, to 3 very high. Together, the 3 dimensions can add up to as many as 9 points, and all scores of 6 and higher are considered high relevance. Next slide. What does it mean to have a highly useful service? OSEP has determined that there are 2 dimensions for usefulness: ease and suitability. The ease dimension is, does the content delivered through the service address a problem or issue in an easily understood way, with directions or guidance regarding how the content can be used to address the problem or issue? And the suitability dimension is, does the service provide the target audiences with information or resources that can be used again or in different ways to address the problem or issue? The independent panel reviewers judges the usefulness of a service by scoring each dimension on the same 4-point scale, ranging from 0 to very low, to 1 for moderately low, to 2 for moderately high, to 3 for very high. In addition, the score for the ease dimension is double-weighted, which means the services can receive either 0, 2, 4, or 6 points for ease. Together, the 2 dimensions can add up to as many as 9 points, and all scores of 6 and higher are considered highly useful. Next slide. The last short-term program performance measures involves a cost measure. As you see on the screen, the measure is calculated by taking the total number of services provided by the program, that is, every single parent center, and dividing by the annual program costs. So the services counted are training and individual assistance services provided to individuals, website hits, newsletters sent, social media, and attendance at individual meetings. The total cost of the program for the past few years has been approximately $27,411,000. You provided the Center for Parent Information and Resources with the annual count of the services you provided, and it's this number, aggregated across all parent centers, that is used in the calculation. Therefore, it's really important to provide the most accurate numbers possible. Next slide. The long-term measures are calculated from the results of the program measure surveys that you report to the Center for Parent Information and Resources in November. The sampling method used by the CPIR assures that the responses are as representative as possible of the parents served by the Parent Center program as a whole. For the long-term measures about parents' understanding of IDEA rights and responsibilities, the measure is calculated from responses to 2 questions. The first question is, the information or support you received from the Parent Center met your needs? And the second question is, you are able to understand the information you received from the Parent Center. Since the responses vary on a 4-point scale from strongly disagree to strongly agree, only those responses that are agree and strongly agree are counted as indicating an increased knowledge of rights and responsibilities. The total number of positive responses across both questions are then divided by the total number of responses to arrive at a percentage. Next slide. For the long-term measure about the parents' increased capacity to work together with professionals and providers, the measure is calculated from the response to 2 questions. The first question is, you are prepared to use the information you receive from the Parent Center. And the second question is, you feel confident in your ability to work with schools and or service providers to meet the needs of your child. Since the responses vary in a 4-point scale from, again, strongly disagree to strongly agree, only those responses that are agree and strongly agree are counted as indicating an increased capacity to work with professionals and providers. The total number of positive responses across both questions are then, again, divided by the total number of responses to arrive at a percentage. Next slide. So this slide details the parent-centered data collection methodology last used in 2018. 29 centers were chosen to provide data for the program's CPIR measures during the 2018 data collection cycle, and those centers are not at all included in the pool for this year. Remember that a center cannot be chosen for 2 years in a row to participate in the data collection. Next slide. So now you can see what the results were from last year's data collection. You can see from the figures on the screen that we missed the target for quality since our actual percentage was 86.2, lower than the target of 93%. The percentage means that 3 of the services collected from the 29 centers did not meet the definition of high quality. For relevance, we exceeded the target of 93% since only 1 center service did not meet the definition of high relevance, which translates to 96.6 you see on the screen. For usefulness, 2 center services did not meet the definition of high usefulness, which resulted in a measure of 93.1%, just above the target. Please know that we know how very high the targets are, and that, depending on the sample size, we may sometimes not meet the targets. We also realize that many of you have provided multiple descriptions over multiple years, and some of you have been chosen almost every other year. But it's important that you approach every service description with renewed energy and attention so that you can do justice to the excellence of your services. Again, there will be considerable technical assistance available to you, but you need to ask for it and take advantage of it. Please pay attention to the writing so that the best possible description, you can provide the best possible description when your parent center is chosen to participate. As for the long-term measures, we have not yet set targets since 2017 was the first year it was collected and officially reported. We did not report figures for 2018, but we will be doing the calculation in 2019 to determine if there's stability in the percentages based on the 3 years of collection. The numbers you see here for the long-term measure are the numbers that were calculated, but again, they were not reported. Next slide. This ends a part of the webinar about the CPIR measures generally and the results of the 2018 collection. The rest of the webinar is most relevant to the centers included in the 2019 sample and the TA centers who will support them. So with that, I will now turn the webinar over to Elaine. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. This is Elaine Carlson with WESTAT. I'm a co-director for the Center to Improve Program and Project Performance, or CIP, and we'll be working with you this year and with OSEP on the GEPRA data collections. I will just start by saying that we are eager to help you through this process. We know for some of you it's kind of old hat and you've done it many times. For others, that's less so, and you might appreciate some support from us. So please feel free to ask. We'll give you an email address and phone numbers that you can use to contact us, and we'll be happy to help. We want to make this as easy as we can. So let's talk just a minute about the QRU collection methodology for this year. There are no substantive changes from what was done last year. 31 centers across the CPRCs and the PTIs have been randomly selected to send in service descriptions for the quality, relevance, and usefulness measures. So the centers will initially be asked to send a list of their 3 most effective or best services. And when we say a list, it's really just a 1-sentence description of those 3 services. CIP will then randomly select 1 of the 3 services, and the center will be asked to complete and submit a more comprehensive service description for that 1 sampled service. As Carmen mentioned earlier, any centers that were included in 2018 or funded for the first time in 2019 are not included in the sample. So if for some reason you think you've been included erroneously, please let us know, and we will look into it. But I think that we've excluded the centers that were included last year. So first, let's talk about the definition of a service. OSEP has defined it as work performed by an OSEP-funded project to provide information to a specific audience relevant to the improvement of outcomes for children with disabilities. For the parent centers, services often include conducting training or leading and convening informational meetings, responding to inquiries, for example, over the phone or in person, IEP clinics, IEP meeting support, and in some cases, intensive technical assistance to families. For the purposes of GEPRA reporting, your website is not considered a service. So please don't list that as one of the 3 services that you send to us, because it's not considered a service for these purposes. Okay, so let's talk just briefly about the cost and long-term collection methodology for this year. As Carmen mentioned previously, the cost measure will be calculated according to the methodology used previously and based on the November survey that you did for CPIR. The baselines for those long-term measures will be determined based on the results of the questions, as Carmen described. And then the cost and long-term measures will not require you to send us any additional information. Everything that's needed for the long-term measures has already been submitted. So let's just talk briefly about the timeline. The process that we'll be going through will last between now and March 11th. So all of the centers should have been notified of their selection for this year's GEPRA process on January 25th. On February 18th, we need to receive from you the list of your top 3 services. We will subsequently sample and let you know which of the one service we would like you to complete the description guide, and that will happen on February 25th. Then we will convene the expert panels to rate the quality, relevance, and usefulness based on the service description guide that you provided. And then we'll wrap up by March 11th. The one thing that is different this year is that we will be asking the grantees to upload their materials to a website, sipsite.org. And so at the end of this presentation, we will be doing a demonstration of the site. And then there is also hard copy documentation to help with access to the site.
Thank you, Elaine. I just want to also stress that you will have 2 weeks between February 25th and March 11th to send in your actual descriptions, but you can certainly start looking at the TA that's available now. And we want to talk a little bit about what some tips for submitting your top 3 services and also for the accompanying materials. So when you send SIP your list of the top 3 most frequently used services, try to be as specific as you can. Don't say workshops. Pick an individual workshop, such as a workshop to tell parents about transition services, or a workshop for early intervention parents about natural environments. Be as specific as you can when you describe the service. Don't write something like telephone assistance without qualifying what kind of assistance. Telephone assistance, for example, to particular populations, or telephone assistance on particular topics. Select only a few accompanying materials that most accurately explain the service. Review panelists are not obligated to look at every accompanying material, and you don't want them to miss the most important features of your service. You don't want them to get lost in all the materials that you send them. Again, be very specific in your choice of proposed submissions and selective in your use of supporting materials. You'll see up there that the kind of materials we're looking for, which is documents, checklists, web pages if applicable, and try to limit your supporting materials to no more than 5 files. Next page. Take the time necessary to develop a really complete, clear, and accurate service description. This document is extremely important. It's the primary document reviewed by the panel. Please note all the tips mentioned on this slide. Read each of the criterion carefully and respond fully and clearly to the criterion. Guide your reader, who will be the reviewer, to your response to the criteria so that they can clearly see how your service meets the criteria they're looking at. Share your descriptions with others so that they can ask clarifying questions and correct inadvertent mistakes. Lastly, please proofread carefully. Mistakes in spelling, grammar, etc. can be really distracting to the readers and can affect their perspective of the kinds of services you provide. So we want to then go on to the next page, and Elaine will go over some specific examples of service descriptions that are good and specific.
So I will also say that on the CPIR website, there are examples of service descriptions from prior years, and so feel free if you want some other specific examples of what people have done in the past. But we thought it would be helpful to just show you a few examples that we've extracted from service descriptions we received last year. The main point here is to show you the level of specificity that the reviewers are looking for. So in this case, the example is for the first quality measure, which is that the content reflects relevant legislation or policy. And I'm not going to read this word for word, but as you'll see on the slide, the respondent is talking about rule number 51 and rule number 52, which is their state regulation. They're talking about IDEA Part B, sections 003, 006, 009, and they're then, specifying what the content of those specific sections is. So they're talking about identification and evaluation. They're talking about the IEP sections. They're talking about placement and LRE. So you see here that there's just a level of detail that gives the reviewer a lot to hang their hat on when they're trying to show that the service reflects relevant legislation or policy. So this is an example for the second quality domain, which is that the service is presented in a way that is clearly understood. There are many ways to show documentation for this, but these are a few. So the materials are shared and edited by staff to make sure the content is appropriate and easily understood by the parents. Webinars and presentations are adapted to the size, location, and experience of the audience, or that the staff use adult learning methods so that they're using icebreaker activities, PowerPoints, videos, interactive activities. And just all of you are doing many wonderful things, I'm sure, in order to ensure that your materials are clearly understood, that your services are clearly understood by families. So just try to document those in a detailed fashion. So this is an example of some text from the first relevance dimension, which is that the content addresses an important problem or a critical issue. In the first bullet, you'll see that the center said that more than 78% of the callers were seeking information about the IEP process. And then clearly this was a service that, pertained to IEP processes. In the next bullet, the center talked about their three-part webinar series, what it was designed to do, and specifically how it was dealing with a critically important issue. So you'll see, again, the type of detail that's required in order for the panelists to really understand what it is that you did when you delivered the particular service. The next relevance dimension is to ensure that the problem or issue is recognized as important. Data are always helpful in these sorts of descriptions. So in this case, the center is talking about a webinar that they had done. They indicated that they had done a follow-up survey to get evaluative information about the webinar. And they said 90% of the participants agreed that the information was useful, 88% said it was relevant, and 94% said that it was of high quality. And they gave a little information about how those criteria were met. Oops, next slide. Let's see. Oh, there we go. So in terms of usefulness, which the first dimension is that the content addresses the problem in an easily understood way. So again, these 3 bullets give you an idea of ways in which other centers have addressed this issue. In one case, they talked about creating an index for state documents to assist parents that were using rules and regulations. In another case, they're talking about meeting the needs of parents who speak different languages or who have different levels of knowledge about the special education system. In another case, they're talking about IEP presentations that have different formats, different lengths, or again, that deal with different experience levels. So again, tying the characteristics of the audience with the delivery method is one way to show that you're addressing the problem in an easily understood way. The next usefulness, the next usefulness measure is that the content can be used again. So in this case, the center indicated that the materials in the packet can be an ongoing reference for parents, that they archive a recording of the tips and tools training, that they put it on their website, and that they encourage the parents to call back and ask questions. So again, building on work that they have done, showing that the content can be reused. And that helps, again, for the panelists to understand how this usefulness measure is being met. Okay, Carmen, you're going to talk about technical assistance.
Thank you, Elaine. So I can't stress enough how important it is to ask for support. Don't be hesitant about asking for advice and assistance. Asking for technical assistance is a sign of strength, not of weakness. You can look at exemplary service descriptions annotated by joining the Program Measures Collection Work Group in the CPIR workspaces. Regional PTACs are available for technical assistance to help you write a strong service description. In addition, if you need to, you can arrange a conference call with SIP if you need additional assistance. So do join the Program Measures Collection Work Group in the CPIR workspaces. Let's go on to the next slide. This is what the workspace looks like. Here's the CPIR workspace and performance measures. The examples that Elaine just went over in some detail are actually up there. We have examples from 3 PTIs and 2 CPRCs from last year that are posted on the website. But if you keep digging into the website, you'll see examples from the last, I believe, 3 years now. And so there's many examples there for you to look at and see which one seems to speak to you and be a clear kind of marker for you to use in your service description. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Marielle, who's going to discuss now how to put your information up on the website.
Yes. Hello. So now we'll be doing the demonstration portion of the webinar for you to upload your services onto the SIP site. Okay. So when you go to the SIP site, this will be the home page that you get to. And to log in, you'll press the login button here. So what's going to happen is you'll be receiving via email your login credentials, which will be the username that you provide to us as your primary email address. And then we will be providing a default password for you to log in initially. So again, in the email, you'll receive your username, which is your email address, and we'll make clear what your default password is. And so I'm going to show you the step that if for any reason, once you follow that process, if you forget your password, you would click the Forgot Password link here, and you would go on to enter your email address, and then, or you'll enter your email address and press the Send Password button, which will give you an email that has information that looks like this. So this is your new temporary password. And again, you'll get this email when you do the reset password function. So you can copy that, and then you can go on to log in with your credentials, and I'll do so with my test credentials. And then that password that you copied from the email, you can paste that here and you'll be able to log in. Uh-oh.
I think you have a typo, Muriel.
Yep. Okay. And so once you do that, you will be prompted to reset your password. And this same step will actually happen to you once you log in initially with the default password we provide in the email. So this is the same step as if you would reset your password. So you'll want to enter your current password here, and then, which for you will be that default password if you're logging on initially. And then when you create your new password, just be mindful of the criteria that your password needs to meet. And this is a test account, so I already have that prepared here. So you'll press your reset password button and continue on to the home page. So when you log in, this is what you'll see, and you can see there's some other options here. However, you can feel free to look at those, but the first tile that you'll need to select will be the Conduct GEPA Report tile. And then you'll notice that on the page, there are some other areas here that are empty, and that's because we tailored the view for you, so you have, you're only seeing what you need to see to navigate through to make it easier. So when you see a tile, you can feel free to navigate through, since that's the only one that you'll need to select. And then these are categories, so you'll select this. Again, this is the only tile that will be presented to you. And then you'll go on to select the Parent Centers Documents tile. And here, once you reach here, there are actually two options. So you have two folders where you can select the guidance documents, where there will be a copy of today's PowerPoint. And then the grantee documents folder is the folder you'll need to select to get to the folders for the programs. So I'm going to click on grantee documents. And as you can see here, there's a folder for each project. So we want you just to access the folder for your project. Now, be mindful that other grantees cannot see your scores. As a matter of fact, no grantee can see any scores, and the folders will be locked after our data collection ends. But at this time, we want you to just access your folder, so you can navigate your folder and access it. And once you click on your folder, and this is my folder here, my test folder, you'll see that you're able to upload files in two ways. You can either upload it by using this icon here, or you can drag and drop the files. So I'm going to demonstrate that both ways. So if you click on upload, you get to browse your folders, whether it's your desktop or your network folders, your documents, and you can go on to select it and upload it here. And then another way is if you select it you can go into your folder this way, and you can actually just take that document and drop it. And so that just gives you two ways that you can upload your services. And then and that's pretty much all you have to do. Now, so these are your three services. Now, once we do the random sampling and we select the service that you are to submit your description guide for and your supporting materials, we will, in that email, be notifying you of a naming convention. So we would really appreciate it if you name your documents in the pattern that we provide via email. And that concludes the webinar, or the demonstration portion of how to access the site. And we'll definitely be available if you need any assistance. Let me get back, sorry.
I will just say that if anyone is having difficulty getting on the site or has trouble with their password, please let us know. We don't want you to spin your wheels when we can easily provide assistance with that.
Yes, and this is Carmen again, and I also want to stress that because of the limits of SharePoint, you can see other people who submit their information. You can go into those folders. Just stick to your folder as much as stick to your folder and put in the information you need to. But I also want to clarify that at no point will any grantee be able to see any scores once the reviewers go through the review process. So you will never see your scores. No other grantee will ever see your scores. The scores are only seen by the contractors and ultimately when the data is crunched by OSEP, because we really want to stress that the scores matter overall for the entire program. They're not necessarily indicative of what's going on at the individual level, which is why you never will see scores, you will never receive your scores, and your project officer won't discuss your score with you. It's just really a measure of overall what this means for the program. So up here you see both Carrie and Marielle, and please feel free to reach out to them if you have any questions about the collection process. They can be reached at 301 numbers. Carrie can be reached at 301-294-2680. That's 301-294-2860. And Marielle can be reached at 301-610-8846. Please remember to upload your completed service description guides and any of the accompanying materials electronically by March 11th. So when you get notified no later than the 24th, what service you will be describing, please work on it as quickly as possible so you can upload everything by March 11th. You have the freedom to upload them as a Word or a PDF file, so it's up to you how you want to do it. And also for the supporting, if the supporting materials can be easily accessed through the web, in other words, they're publicly available materials, it might make sense for you to provide the URL address where these materials can be found in your service description, because that will make it easier for the reviewers to be able to click on that link, go to the publicly available information and materials, and do their work. So with that, I'm going to just thank everybody for your work. I know it's always a busy time with the parent centers, and I know you're doing an incredible amount of work, and we really appreciate your attending to this. We apologize for the earlier difficulties, but we hope that this recorded webinar is clearer and easier for you to understand. But again, I can't stress enough, if you have any questions and they're of a technical nature, then do reach out to Carrie and Marielle. If there are questions about how to improve your service description, reach out to your regional technical assistance center. If neither of them can be helpful, reach out to your project officer. But either way, we want to make sure that you have the answers so that you can do the work and get your service descriptions in by the 11th, because we know just how much else you have to do, and that this is a heavy lift. So with that, I want to thank you. I want to thank Elaine and Marielle for their help with this webinar, and take care, everyone.